Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research and our own experiences towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I am Dr. Grajdian, and I'm a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. In today's video, I share my thoughts on late modernity as a concatenation of democracy and capitalism, while focusing on details which transcend classical statements, highlighting immediate, superficial data and results. I believe it is important to ask ourselves fundamental questions related to the times we are living in and to the world we are going to pass on to our children and to future generations. Beneath ideological constraints or economical concerns. In this video, I start with a definition of late modernity with its two major characteristics, capitalism and democracy, and then I ponder on the perils of forgetting or ignoring the lessons of history with specific focus on the 20th century. And now, first things first, that is two important disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, The School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The ideas I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experiences, research, and for better or for worse, failures, and my recovery from those failures, recovery which is continuously ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel named The School of Love cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to this channel, at this moment I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. And now back to today's topic, which is late modernity with its two main characteristics, democracy and capitalism. So as I said, I start with the definition. So what is late modernity? Late modernity is, in my conceptualization of history, so the period of time after the end of the Cold War, so since the beginning of the 90s, in which we experience a series of phenomena which were unthinkable just a couple of decades ago. And generally speaking, when we talk about modernity, we talk mainly about two paradigms, capitalism and democracy. And as the 21st century progresses, it is important to think of fresh ways to adapt both capitalism and democracy to current historical challenges, of which super long life expectancy is probably the most stringent. So capitalism and democracy were built up of own specific principles going in the Western world back as far as ancient Greece and ancient Roman Empire. And people back then didn't live such long lives. Even the elite didn't live more than 50, 60 years of life. And nowadays, the general population is living 80, 90, 100 years. So, and we essentially tripled the life expectancy in less than 2 generations. And this will have, is still already having, very strong impact on how the society functions. So both capitalism and democracy are finding themselves being challenged in light of recent developments, of which super long life expectancy is the most stringent. Yeah. So what is capitalism? Is an economic system, is one among several possible, which is based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. So, and central characteristics of capitalism are capital accumulation, competitive markets, price system, private property rights recognition, voluntary exchange and of goods, voluntary exchange of goods, and wage labor. So, so talking about capitalism in a market, it is a market-dominated system, a market-dominated economy in which decision-making and investments are determined by owners of wealth, property, or ability to maneuver capital or production ability in capital and financial markets. Whereas prices and the distribution of goods and services are mainly determined by competition in goods and services markets. So there are various dimensions of how capitalism is structured and how it emerged and how it has been spreading from the Western world in other areas of the earth. But what is important is that it stays in very strict opposition to communism or even socialism. And as someone who was born and has been raised or has spent her formative years in Romania, in communist Romania of late 70s and early 1980s, I am a very strong proponent and supporter of capitalism. The second dimension of modernity is democracy. Which is a form, again, one of among many forms of government in which the people have the authority to deliberate and decide legislation, that is a direct democracy, or to choose governing officials to do so, which is a representative democracy. And who is considered part of the people and how authority is shared among or delegated by the people has changed over time and at different rates in different countries. So features of democracy, characteristics of democracy often include freedom of assembly, association, property rights, freedom of religion and speech, inclusiveness and equality, citizenship, consent of the governed, voting rights, freedom from unwarranted governmental deprivation of the right to life, and liberty and minority rights. Again, the concept of democracy has evolved tremendously over time. So throughout history, one can find evidence of direct democracy in which communities make decisions through popular assembly. Today, the dominant form of democracy is actually representative democracy, where citizens elect government officials to govern on their behalf, such as in a parliamentary or presidential democracy. So as you see, these are two dimensions which actually allow for a lot of freedom and for a lot of agency and autonomy of individuals living in modernity, living in such a system dominated by capitalism and democracy. But recently, there is a tendency to question the validity both of capitalism and of democracy as unsuitable for the realities of the 21st century and the centuries coming afterwards. The alternatives, such as communism, both as an economic and a political paradigm, are not attractive at all, at least from my perspective, as they promote ideologies of annihilation and brutal equity, crushing individual freedoms and creativity. This is the first point I would like to make today, is that when people talk about equity, it very much refers to annihilating or at least stringently and brutally diminishing individual creativity and individual potential and individual effort. This is not to say there are no good elements in promoting equity, but in my opinion, it is much more important to promote a healthy sense of equality of chances, equality of freedom, equality of opportunities, which start very early on in one's life. For instance, already in nursery school and in kindergarten. So equality of education in which children are more or less equally educated. Let's exclude for a while the super rich and the elites, the 1%, which is actually much smaller than 1%. Let's exclude it for the sake of the discussion. So an equal educational system, or an educational system which provides equality of chances, of opportunities very early on, is much more beneficial, in my opinion, than a system which promotes equity of results, because then we'll deal with a world in which nobody has the right or the possibility or the opportunity or the chance or the freedom to be exceptional. And the world as we know it nowadays thrives on exceptional individuals and has been thriving on exceptional individuals. Yes, we can argue that there are huge detriments and huge problems to the system as we know it nowadays. But if we look at the history of the 20th century, anything else is a bad choice. Anything else is a bad alternative. If we look at the atrocities of fascism in Nazi Germany, and then at the atrocities of communism in former Soviet Union, in China, in Cambodia, even in Romania, we realize that communism as a political system or a social political system and as economic system are not real alternatives to capitalism and democracy. Generally speaking, people who talk about this kind of change towards a more socialist approach to life, yes, socialism works in small communities, in small countries of, I don't know, a couple of million people, like the Nordic countries, like the Scandinavian countries. But for large populations, this is in fact not attainable. I have talked with some friends and acquaintances from the northern country, from the Scandinavian countries, and as always, they gave me some very interesting insights into their social systems, which are not so brilliant and sparklingly egalitarian as we might think of it. They are just systems in which individuals, they are given equal chances, but at the end of the day, they are not able to develop an exceptional individuals. Another issue I would like to address is that so the solution I see is to reflect on the lessons of the past rather than to cancel them, and in particular the lessons of the 20th century, and to deepen in a controlled manner the dynamics of capitalism and democracy by enhancing access to education, which then provides fertile ground for critical thinking and civil courage. These are the two dimensions which I think are very important nowadays, and I see them either weakening or disappearing altogether, depending on in which society you look at, and which even very diverse society, which level of the society you look at. So critical thinking and civil courage. Critical thinking is the ability to think critically, as it says, to think in the first place, and then to think critically in the first place, and refers in fact to this ability to question things, not to accept everything as such what media or politicians or friends or society is telling you, or family is telling you, but to think critically, to question things, to say, well, it looks like this, but is it really like this? So this, and the critical thinking can only be developed in a free society, and is in a society which educates people, educates its children towards freedom and, individualism. I'm also not talking here about this wild version of individualism we sometimes stumble upon in realist novels of the 19th century, which are in a way traumatizing in themselves. I'm talking about the type of individualism which allows for individual excellence to emerge and then to be developed, which then eventually leads to collective excellence. In communism, this is not possible. In communism, both as a economic and a social politic system, this is not possible, because communism tends, communism promotes the idea that it, to, to each according to its needs, from each according to its abilities, which then actually does not encourage at all individual excellence, but encourages and supports and promotes not even mediocrity, but becoming increasingly dependent on others. And it's okay if a specific segment of the population depends on others. Yeah, but if a critical segment of the population, somewhere around 40-50%, becomes dependent on the rest of the population, this is already a disaster for the respective society. And then, if that percentage increases because nobody really wants to be self-reliant, but everybody wants to rely on others, then you will have very soon a dysfunctional society. The same goes for communism as an economic system, because being a state-promoting economic system in which everything is centralized, and politicians or so specific members of the government decide what's going on. We all know that elites have no contact with the reality, with the everyday reality of regular citizens. We all know that politicians are completely cut off from reality, from quotidian reality. Allowing them to make such decisions cannot lead to good results, and as I said, for very obvious reasons. There's just they do not have contact with reality. They surround themselves with yes people, yes men, and yes women who are very careful in supporting them and telling them what they want to hear, and they become very skilled at doing this. For better or for worse, those promoting communism or even some sort of socialism as a solution to all troubles of the world, they are not thinking realistically, and they do not even try to learn or to understand something from recent history, which is really not that far away. So these are my opinion in this. These are my thoughts on late modernity. In late modernity, we are facing various challenges. One of them being the super long life expectancy of the population, and not only of a tiny elite, but actually of regular citizens. And the older we get, we know we tend to become more conservative, to become more reliant on others, and to expect others to both respect and listen to us. Which, it works when this is a minority, but when it becomes a majority, and most people are not really prepared to let go of being, the senior of this seniority privilege, or to employ it in a constructive and positive manner, then actually we have a problem. And in my opinion, we have a problem we can solve. If we address it, we can solve. Anything is solvable if we address it. But if we run away from it, this is just, or if we look at side effects instead of going back to the root causes of such problems, then we'll find kind of band-aid solutions. So we'll find the temporary solutions to a problem which in time only gets worse. This is why our generation of grown-ups now, we have to do our best to continue the democracy and capitalism as fundamental structures of the society, not only late modernity, but also for the generations and centuries to come, and be very aware that shifting from these two paradigms towards something like communism is not actually a solution. And the battles we are not battling nowadays, the battles we are not facing nowadays, our children will have to face tomorrow. This will be my thought. I know I'm very aware this is kind of very superficial and only touches the surfaces of the problem, but starting the conversation and kicking off this awareness, I think it's important enough. And while I'm not a specialist on this topic, I'm always eager to learn and to hear other thoughts on these topics. Thank you very much for listening to me, and as always, I'm looking forward to welcoming you here very soon again. Love and peace to you all.